The stranger in the chapel. The late afternoon sun burned low over Lone Creek Valley, turning the dust in the air into ribbons of gold. Inside St. Matthew's Chapel, the townsfolk sat in their Sunday best, the smell of pine pews and candle wax thick in the air. The bishop's voice rose steady and slow, reading from a good book, while the faint hum of wagon wheels rolled somewhere down the road outside. It was an ordinary Sunday, quiet, reverent, until the chapel doors swung open with a long, drawn-out creak. Every head turned. A stranger stood in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a trail-worn duster that looked like it had seen both war and weather. Dust clung to his boots. A revolver hung at his hip, and his hat shadowed eyes sharp as broken glass. The bishop faltered mid-sermon. "Can I help you, son?" he asked, his voice uncertain. The stranger didn't answer right away. His gaze was locked on the front row, on a young woman sitting quietly near the altar. Her name was Clara Mayfield, and even in the dim light of the chapel, she looked like sunlight breaking through clouds. But there was sadness in her eyes, and the faintest bruise darkened her cheekbone, half hidden by a lock of golden hair. When a stranger finally spoke, his voice was deep and calm, but carried weight enough to still the entire room. "I've come for Clara," he said. A ripple of shock went through the congregation. Murmurs filled the chapel like rustling leaves. Clara's hands tightened around her hymn book. Her face went pale. The bishop blinked, confused. "Excuse me." The stranger took a slow step forward, boots echoing against the wooden floor. "You heard me, Bishop. I've come for Clara Mayfield. You can't simply walk in here and—" The stranger's voice cut him off, quiet but sure. "She's my wife now." The words hit like a hammer. Gasps rose from every pew. An old woman clutched her pearls. A farmhand muttered, "Good Lord." The bishop froze, and the heavy wooden cane he used for support slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering to the floor with a hollow thud. For a moment, only the sound of the wind outside filled the silence. The bishop's voice trembled. "W wife? Surely there must be a misunderstanding." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "No misunderstanding, sir. We were married 3 days ago, under the stars beyond Cottonwood Ridge. I came here to make it known before God and man." He turned his gaze to Clara. "Ain't that right, darling?" Clara rose slowly from her seat, her eyes glistening. She looked around the chapel, at faces she'd known all her life, and then at him. "Yes," she whispered. "It's true." The bishop steadied himself against the pulpit. "My child, Sheriff Calder." "Sheriff Calder doesn't own her," the cowboy said sharply. "Not by promise, not by papers, not by fear." A hush fell again. The cowboy took off his hat, revealing sandy brown hair damp with sweat and travel dust. His eyes were tired but alive, the eyes of a man who'd seen enough pain to understand peace when he found it. "My name's Luke Travis," he said, "and I love her. That's all that matters." The bishop opened his mouth, closed it, then spoke carefully. "You do realize what this means, son? Sheriff Calder won't stand for it. The man's as dangerous as a coiled rattler, and I've faced worse than him," Luke said simply. "And I didn't come to hide." Clara took a trembling breath, then stepped toward him. "He saved my life," she said softly, her voice growing stronger with each word. "When Sheriff Calder found out I was leaving, he struck me. Luke found me near the ridge, hurt, scared, and ready to disappear. He took care of me, and he asked me to marry him under God's sky. I said yes." Whispers turned to uproar. Some voices were shocked, some sympathetic. "That ain't right. She's brave, poor thing. The sheriff will kill them both." Luke ignored it all. He only looked at Clara, the faintest smile touching his lips. Bishop Harold drew a shaky breath and retrieved his fallen cane. "Then may the Lord have mercy," he murmured, "because when Sheriff Calder finds out, there will be blood in Lone Creek." Luke nodded once. "Then I'll face it." He turned toward the door, but Clara caught his sleeve. "Luke," she said softly, "he'll come tonight. You know he will." Luke's eyes softened. "I know. Then what do we do?" He placed his hat back on his head. "We pray, and we stand our ground." Outside, thunder rolled low across the distant hills, the kind of sound that promised rain or war. The townsfolk watched as Luke Travis and Clara Mayfield walked out of St. Matthew's Chapel hand in hand, the setting sun blazing behind them. The bishop stood frozen, the echo of Luke's words still hanging heavy in the air. "She's my wife now." He looked down at the floor where his cane had fallen and whispered to no one in particular. "God help us all." The sheriff's reckoning. The sun slipped behind the jagged ridge that framed Lone Creek Valley, bleeding crimson light across the horizon. Evening settled heavy and strange, like the air itself was holding its breath. Inside St. Matthew's Chapel, the candles flickered low, throwing long shadows across the walls. Bishop Harold still hadn't left. He sat in the front pew, whispering prayers that no one heard. The words of the cowboy still echoed in his mind. "She's my wife now." The bishop had seen many storms pass through Lone Creek, but none like this one. The riders approaching. From the ridge above town came the faint sound of hooves, steady, powerful, and too many to count. Luke Travis stood outside the chapel with Clara beside him. He could hear them coming even before the dust rose in the distance. 6 riders, led by one man whose coat gleamed black as tar in the dying light. Sheriff Wayne Calder. He rode tall and proud, his silver star glinting on his chest and his jaw locked tight with fury. Every inch of him screamed control, the kind that comes from power, money, and fear. Behind him rode his deputies, each armed and eager to show loyalty. The sheriff's black horse snorted, stamping its hooves as they reached the chapel steps. "Luke Travis," Calder called out, his voice cutting through the still air. "You've made a grave mistake, boy." Luke didn't flinch. "Maybe," he said, "but I'll live with it." The sheriff dismounted slowly, his boots crunching against the gravel. His spurs jingled with each step as he came closer. "You stole something that belongs to me." Clara's hands tightened around Luke's arm, but Luke stood firm. "She's not a thing, Sheriff, and she never belonged to you." Calder's mouth twitched into a smirk. "The Mayfield land is bound to my name. The marriage would have sealed it. You think you can undo that with a few whispered vows under a tree?" Luke's voice was calm, quiet, but carried more weight than a shout. "I didn't marry her for land. I married her for love. You would understand that." The sheriff's smirk vanished. He looked at Clara, his eyes dark. "You ungrateful little fool. I gave your father his wealth, gave your family safety. And this is how you repay me? Running off with a drifter?" Clara stepped forward, her fear burning away. "Safety," she snapped. "You call threats and bruises safety? My father lost his soul trying to please you. I won't lose mine." Calder's eyes flared. "You'll regret that, Clara. I promise you." Luke's hand hovered near his revolver. "You'll take that promise to hell if you push her again." The deputies shifted nervously. Everyone in Lone Creek knew Luke Travis's name now, and the stories that came with it. A gunfighter turned ranch hand, a man who'd laid down his weapon for peace, but who could still draw faster than lightning when he had to. The sheriff noticed the movement, and his tone turned mocking. "You really think this ends with words, son?" Luke tilted his hat. "No, but I was hoping it might." 2. Inside the chapel. Rain began to fall, a thin, whispering drizzle that turned to a steady patter on the roof of the chapel. The people of Lone Creek gathered in the distance, peering from porches and windows, their lanterns flickering like fireflies. Luke backed up the chapel steps, one hand still close to his holster. "You want to fight me, Calder? Then do it here, in front of God and everyone." The sheriff chuckled darkly. "God doesn't run this town. I do." He reached for his gun. Before steel could clear leather, thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to shake the earth. Lightning split the sky, blinding white. The bishop rushed to the door. "Stop this madness," he cried. "You'll spill blood on holy ground." Neither man moved. Rain poured harder, soaking their coats, their hats, their anger. "Go inside," Luke murmured to Clara. "I won't leave you," she whispered back. "You have to trust me." Her eyes searched his, full of fear but also faith. She nodded slowly and stepped back through the chapel doorway. The bishop caught her hand, murmuring prayers under his breath. Calder grinned through the rain. "Look at you, trying to play the hero. Do you even know what she's worth?" Luke's voice hardened. "More than you ever will." The sheriff drew. But Luke's gun was already out, faster than breath, faster than thought. One shot. The bullet tore through Calder's sleeve and bit deep into his shoulder. His gun clattered to the ground, useless. He stumbled, clutching the wound, staring in disbelief at the blood mixing with the rain. Luke stepped closer, gun steady but eyes soft with restraint. "You'll live," he said quietly. I don't kill for pride, only to protect. The sheriff's deputies froze. None dared to draw. The power that had ruled them for years was bleeding out in the dirt before their eyes. Pick him up, Luke ordered. Take him to Doc Hargreaves before he loses more blood. Tell him this town doesn't belong to fear anymore. The deputies hesitated, then obeyed. They lifted their fallen leader, muttering under their breath. As they rode off toward the doctor's house, the townspeople began to emerge, cautiously at first, then in murmuring waves. The rain eased. The thunder rolled away. Luke lowered his gun, slid it back into its holster, and looked at Clara. She ran to him, tears and rain mixing on her cheeks. He caught her, pulling her close. For the first time, she didn't tremble. 3. The new morning. By dawn, Lone Creek felt different. The sheriff was alive, but humbled. His deputies scattered, his pride broken. He would recover, but the fear he'd used to rule was gone forever. Inside the chapel, Bishop Harold rang the morning bell himself. When Luke and Clara entered, the old man smiled faintly. "You brought a storm, son," he said. Luke nodded. "Sometimes that's what it takes to clean the dust." The bishop chuckled softly. "And what will you do now?" Luke looked at Clara. "We'll stay a while. There's a ranch out by Willow Creek that's been empty since spring. Maybe it's time it had life again." The bishop nodded, eyes kind. "Then may your marriage be blessed with peace and less gunfire." Clara laughed, a sound bright enough to fill the quiet church. Outside, the sun rose over Lone Creek, golden light spilling over the land. The valley looked alive again. Shops reopened, laughter returned to the streets, and for the first time in years, no one looked over their shoulder in fear. Luke saddled his horse and helped Clara up behind him. She wrapped her arms around him, resting her head against his back. The smell of rain and sagebrush hung in the air as they rode out of town, slow, steady, and free. Bishop Harold stood on the chapel steps, watching them disappear over the ridge. He leaned on his cane, the same one he dropped the day before, and smiled to himself. "She's my wife now," the cowboy had said calmly. And somehow, those words had changed everything. Epilogue. Months later, travelers passing through Lone Creek would speak of a ranch beyond Willow Creek, a quiet place where a man and woman lived simply, raising horses and growing wildflowers in the yard. They said the cowboy still carried his gun, but never had to use it. That the woman with him sang hymns in the evenings, her laughter echoing across the fields. And that, when storms came, they stood together on the porch, the same way they had stood before God and man, unafraid. Because love, when born in truth and defiance, was stronger than any sheriff, any storm, or any past.